The mining drill bit broke through into empty space with a sound like thunder. Minho Choi shut off the machine and wiped sweat from his face. He had been digging in the deep tunnels of Kepler 442b for 6 months, looking for rare metals that the Coalition needed for their ships. "Another cave?" asked his partner, a human woman named Su Jin who had been mining even longer than he had. Minho shone his light into the hole. Instead of rough stone walls, he saw something that made his heart race. Smooth surfaces covered with strange markings stretched away into darkness. These were not natural caves. "Get Yunjung," he said quietly. "Get her now." Yunjung Wang was the closest thing they had to an archaeologist on this world. She had studied ancient history before the Coalition decided that humans were better at digging than thinking. Now she spent her days operating mining equipment. But Minho had seen her examining strange rocks and writing notes when she thought no one was looking. When Yunjung arrived, she took one look into the hole and her eyes went wide. "This is not possible," she whispered. "What is it?" Su Jin asked. Yunjung was already climbing down into the opening. "These markings are older than anything in the Coalition records." "Much older." The 3 humans spent the next hour exploring the hidden chamber. It was huge, with walls that curved up into shadows their lights could not reach. The markings were everywhere, carved deep into stone that felt different from anything they had touched before. In the center of the chamber stood something that looked like an altar or a table. On it were objects that seemed to glow with their own light. When Minho reached toward one of them, Yunjung grabbed his arm. "Do not touch anything yet," she said. "We need to study this properly. We need to document everything." But they were not alone in the chamber. Jiwan Nam had followed them down and she was already walking toward the glowing objects. Jiwan was different from other humans. She had abilities that most people did not have. Sometimes she knew things before they happened. Sometimes she could sense what other people were thinking. The Coalition had tested her years ago and declared her psychically insignificant. Her abilities were too weak to matter, they said. She was still subprime, still just a worker. "Jiwan, wait," Yunjung called, but it was too late. Jiwan's hand touched one of the glowing objects. The chamber filled with light. Not the harsh light of their electric torches, but something soft and warm that seemed to come from the air itself. Jiwan's eyes rolled back in her head and she started to speak, but the words were not hers. "They came from the deep places," she said, in a voice that sounded ancient. "They took our power and made it their own. They told the galaxy they were perfect, but they were thieves. They are still thieves." Images flashed through the air around them. Minho saw cities of crystal and metal, but they were not Vorthak cities. These were older, more beautiful. He saw beings of light and energy working together to build wonders that made Coalition technology look like children's toys. Then came the darkness. Ships like black knives cutting through space, crystal beings that pulsed with stolen power, the beautiful cities burning, the beings of light being hunted and killed until none remained. "The Cathari," Jiwon said, and somehow they all knew this was the name of the beings in the visions. "We were the Cathari. We built the networks that bind thoughts across the stars. We created the harmony that lets minds touch minds, and they murdered us for it." The visions changed. Now they saw the Vorthak in earlier times, before they had their crystal bodies and their psychic powers. They looked smaller, weaker. "More like animals than gods. They were nothing," Jiwan continued. "Less than the humans are now. But they found our technology. They stole our bodies and wore them like clothes. They took our voices and spoke lies with them. They told the galaxy they had always been perfect." Minho felt sick. The rulers of everything, the beings that every species worshipped and feared, were frauds. They had built their empire on genocide and theft. The light began to fade. Jiwan swayed and would have fallen if Sujin had not caught her. When her eyes cleared, she looked around in confusion. "What happened? I remember touching something and then—" "You showed us the truth," Yunjung said softly. "You showed us what really happened to this galaxy." They spent the next 3 hours in the chamber, recording everything they could with their simple mining equipment. Yunjung took pictures of the markings with her personal camera. Minho made detailed drawings of the glowing objects. Sujin measured the dimensions of the room. When they finally climbed back to the surface, they found Tae-young Kim waiting for them. Tae-young was Dae-ho's brother, and he worked in Coalition intelligence. His job was supposed to be translating human reports for alien supervisors, but he had access to communication networks that most humans never saw. You need to be very careful, he said, without any greeting. I have been watching the intelligence networks. 3 human research teams have reported finding ancient ruins in the past year. All 3 teams disappeared within days of making their reports. Unjung felt cold despite the warm air of the mining world. Disappeared how? Officially? Accidents, mining collapses, equipment failures, exposure to toxic gases. But the timing is too perfect. Someone is watching for reports like this. Minho looked back at the hole they had climbed out of. So we cannot tell anyone what we found. We cannot tell the coalition, Tae-young said. But we can tell other humans, carefully. Over the next weeks, word spread quietly through the human networks. So-jin Lee, who flew cargo ships between human colonies, carried messages and small artifacts to trusted contacts. Each person who learned the truth was sworn to secrecy, but also asked to watch for more evidence. The evidence came quickly. Human miners on a dozen worlds reported finding similar ruins. Human researchers working in coalition archives discovered references to extinct species that matched the Cathari. Human maintenance workers on Vorthak ships found technology that looked nothing like what the crystal beings claimed to have invented. Jiwon spent her evenings touching more of the ancient artifacts, each time learning more about the true history of the galaxy. The Cathari had not been the only victims. The Vorthak had systematically destroyed every species that might threaten their rule. They had rewritten history to make themselves the heroes of their own crimes. But the most important discovery came from an unexpected source. Unjung's daughter, Mi-young, who worked as a biotechnologist in a coalition medical facility, managed to get tissue samples from injured Vorthak soldiers. Their crystal structure is not natural, she reported in a coded message. It is artificial, grafted onto a base biology that is actually quite primitive. And there is something else. The crystalline components are extremely sensitive to electromagnetic radiation at specific frequencies. Tae-young understood the implications immediately. Human technology produces those frequencies naturally. Our communications, our power systems, even our simple electronic devices. Are you saying we could hurt them? Minho asked during their secret meeting in an abandoned mining tunnel. I am saying they might not be as powerful as they want us to believe, Tae-young replied. Jiwon touched one of the Cathari artifacts again, seeking more visions. This time she saw the end of the ancient war. She saw Cathari scientists working desperately to find a weakness in their enemies. She saw them discovering the same truth that Mi-young had found. They knew, she whispered when the vision ended. The Cathari knew how to fight back, but they ran out of time. Unjung looked around at the small group of humans gathered in the darkness. They were miners, cargo pilots, technicians, and researchers. The coalition saw them as barely more than animals, but they had uncovered the greatest secret in the galaxy. So what do we do with this knowledge? She asked. No one had an answer yet. They were still just humans, still subprime, still powerless against beings who controlled entire fleets and had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. But for the first time since the coalition had discovered Earth, humans knew something that their masters did not know they knew, and knowledge, as the Cathari had learned too late, could be the most dangerous weapon of all. Dae-ho Kim stood in the center of the massive council chamber, his hands shaking slightly as he held the datapad. Around him, dozens of alien beings sat in floating chairs that glowed with soft light, their eyes, tentacles, and other strange body parts all focused on him. He was the only human in the room. The chamber itself was beautiful and terrifying. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that changed colors. The ceiling was so high that Dae-ho could barely see it. Everything here was designed to make him feel small and weak. It was working. Speak, human, said a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. The words appeared in his mind rather than his ears. This was how the Vorthak talked. They never used their mouths like normal beings. Dae-ho looked up at the highest platform where 3 massive crystal beings sat. They looked like living diamonds, each one the size of a small building. Light moved through their bodies in patterns that hurt to look at. These were the Vorthak, the rulers of everything. Honorable Prime Council, Dae-ho began, his voice sounding tiny in the huge space. I have brought new research about human biology and our place in the galaxy. One of the crystal beings shifted. Light pulsed through its body faster. Your research is not needed, Subprime. We know what humans are. You are workers, nothing more. Dae-ho felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry here would mean death. Or worse. With respect, Prime Zethmara, Humans have shown abilities that might change how we are classified. The chamber filled with a sound like breaking glass. It took Deho a moment to realize the aliens were laughing at him. Classification is not changed. Seth Mara's voice cut through his thoughts like a knife. Humans are subprime gamma, you dig. You carry. You die when we no longer need you. This is the natural order. Deho's datapad showed charts and numbers that proved humans were more than just workers. They learned faster than many other species. They solved problems in ways that surprised even the smartest aliens. They survived in places where other beings died. But none of that mattered here. The Galactic Coalition had rules. These rules had been the same for thousands of years. At the top were the Vorthak, the prime alpha species. They were perfect in every way that mattered. They had powers that let them speak without words, move things without touching them, and know things that happened far away. Below them were the other prime species. Each one was good at something special. Some were great at building ships. Others were amazing at science or art. All of them were better than humans in the ways that the Coalition counted as important. At the bottom were species like humans. Subprime meant they were useful for simple work but not much else. They were too weak, too slow, and too stupid to be anything more than tools. Deho had spent years trying to prove this was wrong. He studied human settlements on dozens of worlds. He watched humans adapt to places that killed other species. He saw them find solutions when the smart aliens gave up, but every report he sent was ignored or lost. Your time is finished, Subprime, Seth Mara said. Return to your duties. As Deho walked toward the exit, he passed other beings who barely looked at him. A tall, thin alien with purple skin whispered to its friend about the amusing little human. A creature that looked like a walking tree shook its branches in what might have been laughter. Outside the council chamber, Yunji Park waited for him. She was one of only 3 human diplomats in the entire coalition government. Her job was to speak for all human colonies, but she had almost no power to actually help anyone. How did it go? She asked, though his face already told her the answer. The same as always, Deho said. They do not want to hear anything that does not fit their rules. Yunji nodded sadly. She had been fighting the same battle for 15 years. Every day she asked for better treatment for human colonies. Every day she was told that humans should be grateful for what they had. The Vorthak took 3 more human worlds last week, she said quietly. They called it optimization of resources. The families living there were moved to mining stations. Deho felt sick. Mining stations were death sentences. The work was hard, the air was bad, and most humans died within 5 years. But the Coalition called this mercy because they let humans live instead of just taking the worlds by force. There has to be something we can do, Deho said. Like what? Fight them? Yunji laughed, but there was no happiness in it. They have ships that can destroy planets. They have armies of species that worship them. They have powers we cannot even understand. What do we have? Some mining equipment and the ability to live on worlds that others find uncomfortable. They walked through the station's corridors in silence. Nexus Prime was the center of coalition government, and humans were barely tolerated here. Other beings moved out of their way not from respect, but because they did not want to touch something so low. In a small restaurant that served food humans could eat, they met Hyan Su Lee. He worked for Coalition Defense, though his real job was more like a secretary than a strategist. His ideas were sometimes used by alien officers, but never with his name attached to them. I have been looking at Vorthak fleet movements, Hyun-Soo said in a low voice. Something is happening. They are moving ships toward human space faster than ever before. More optimization? Yunji asked. I do not think so. This looks different. They are bringing war fleets, not colony ships. Deho stared at his food. What could they want with war fleets? We have no weapons that could hurt them. We have no ships that could fight them. Hyun-Soo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, maybe that is exactly why they are coming. The 3 humans sat in the bright, cheerful restaurant surrounded by aliens who saw them as barely more than smart animals. Above them, crystal beings who claimed to be perfect made decisions about the fate of billions. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, fleets moved toward human worlds with purposes that none of them could guess. Deho looked at his datapad one more time. All his research, all his proof that humans were more than just workers meant nothing here. But maybe it would mean something somewhere else. Maybe there were other humans who would listen. Maybe there was still hope. He did not know that in a few months everything would change. He did not know that the Vorthak's greatest strength would become their greatest weakness. He did not know that being considered subprime would save his species when being prime would destroy so many others. For now, all he knew was that he had to keep fighting, even when fighting seemed impossible. Dongjun Park crawled through the wreckage of the research station, his breathing mask fogging with each scared breath. Around him lay the bodies of his team members, killed in what the Coalition would call a tragic mining accident. But Dongjun knew better. He had seen the Vorthak ship leaving just before the explosions started. He clutched the datapad containing everything they had discovered about the ancient Cathari ruins on Tau Ceti Prime. 3 months of careful excavation and translation work, all nearly lost because they had gotten too close to the truth. The escape pod was damaged but functional. As Dongjun programmed it for the nearest human settlement, he sent out a coded message on frequencies that only other humans monitored. Archive compromised. Package intact. Need pickup. 2 days later, he was sitting in a hidden room beneath a water processing plant on New Busan Colony, facing a group of humans he had only heard about in whispers. They called themselves the Network, and they were the closest thing humanity had to organized resistance. Chan Wook Nam, an older man with scars on his hands from years of factory work, listened to Dongjun's report without interruption. Around the table sat others: Mi-young Choi, the biotechnologist who had analyzed Vorthak tissue; Ju-hee Wang, a communications specialist who had helped build their secret message system; and several others whose faces showed the same grim determination. "Tell us what you found," Chan Wook said simply. Dongjun activated his datapad, and holographic images filled the dark room. The Cathari were not just another extinct species. They were the original creators of psychic technology. Everything the Vorthak use, from their mind speech to their ability to move objects without touching them, was stolen from the Cathari. The images showed ancient laboratories filled with crystalline devices. These crystals are not Vorthak bodies. They are Cathari tools designed to amplify natural psychic abilities. The Vorthak discovered them and found ways to graft them onto their own biology. Mi-young leaned forward. That explains what I found in the tissue samples. The crystal structures are foreign implants, not natural evolution. And they are unstable. Unstable how? Asked Ju-hee. They require constant energy input to maintain their structure. Energy that comes from electromagnetic fields generated by the host's nervous system. But they are also vulnerable to interference from external electromagnetic sources. Dongjun nodded excitedly. The Cathari records confirm this. In their final days, they were working on weapons that could disrupt the stolen crystal technology. They called it frequency warfare. Chan Wook was quiet for a long moment. Show us what human technology does to Vorthak crystals. Mi-young pulled up her own data. I managed to expose tissue samples to various electromagnetic frequencies. Standard human communication signals caused minor disruption. Power grid frequencies caused moderate damage. But when I used the specific frequencies generated by our mining equipment, she paused. Complete cellular breakdown. The crystals shattered at the molecular level. The room fell silent. They were looking at proof that humanity's most basic technology could kill beings that the entire galaxy considered gods. How many people know this? Chan Wook asked. On my team, everyone is dead except me, Dongjun said. But the information has been shared through the network to research groups on 17 human colonies. Ju-hee spoke up. I have been coordinating those communications. We now have confirmation from 8 different worlds. Human miners using standard equipment have caused accidents that killed or injured Vorthak overseers. Each time the Coalition blamed equipment malfunctions or human carelessness, because they do not want anyone to know how vulnerable the Vorthak really are, Mi-young said. Chan Wook stood and walked to a wall covered with star charts. Red dots marked human colonies. Blue dots marked major Vorthak installations. The blue dots vastly outnumbered the red ones. Seokjin Lee has been analyzing Vorthak fleet movements, he said, pointing to the charts. They are preparing for something big. Ships are being moved into position around human space. A new voice spoke from the shadows in the corner of the room. They are planning to eliminate the human threat permanently. Everyone turned to see a figure step into the light. It was Yoonji Park, the diplomat they had last seen on Nexus Prime months ago. She looked tired and scared. The Coalition Council has been debating what they call the human problem. she continued. Some species think we are becoming too numerous, too spread out. They want us concentrated on fewer worlds where we can be better controlled. And the Vorthak? Shan-Wook asked. The Vorthak want us gone entirely. They have convinced the Council that humans are a potential threat to galactic stability. There will be a vote next month on Resolution 2387H, complete human relocation. Dongjun felt his blood turn cold. Relocation to where? Officially? Secure facilities where we can be properly supervised. Unofficially? Yunji shook her head. There are no secure facilities being built. This is genocide disguised as administrative policy. The room erupted in angry voices, but Chan-Wook raised his hand for silence. How long do we have? The vote is in 37 days. If it passes, implementation begins immediately. They estimate it will take 6 months to relocate all human populations. Mi Young was staring at her data pad. We could fight back. If every human settlement knows what we know, if they start accidentally exposing Vorthak to the right frequencies, that would be war, Juhi said quietly. We are already at war, Chan-Wook replied. We just have not been fighting back yet. Over the next week, the network worked frantically to spread the truth. Sojin Lee flew her cargo ship to dozens of human settlements, carrying not just supplies but detailed instructions on how to modify mining equipment, communication arrays, and power systems to produce the frequencies that could kill Vorthak. Hyun-Soo Lee, still working within coalition defense, used his access to provide intelligence on Vorthak ship movements and security protocols. His sister Sojin carried this information between human colonies, helping them coordinate their preparations. The breakthrough came when Young Min Choi, a mining foreman on New Seoul Colony, conducted the first deliberate test. A Vorthak overseer had arrived to inspect their operation, as they did every few months. This time, Young Min made sure the communication array was running at maximum power when the crystal being entered the control room. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The Vorthak's crystalline body began to crack and smoke. The being's psychic scream filled the minds of every human in the facility before cutting off abruptly as the creature collapsed into glittering fragments. Young Min sent a coded message that reached human settlements across a dozen star systems. Test successful. Target eliminated. No witnesses. But they were wrong about the witnesses. Wu Jin Wang, working as a maintenance technician on a Vorthak command ship, intercepted communications that made his hand shake. The Vorthak had felt their overseer die. They knew it was not an accident. Emergency meeting, he signaled through the network. They know. When the resistance leaders gathered again, Wu Jin's report was terrifying. The Vorthak have moved up their timeline. The vote on human relocation has been cancelled. They are implementing immediate protective measures for all human populations. Meaning? Chan-Wook asked. Meaning the genocide starts tomorrow. Mi Young looked around the room at faces filled with fear and determination. Then we fight now or we die as slaves. Chan-Wook nodded slowly. Send the signal to all human colonies. Tell them what is coming. Tell them how to fight. Tell them that the beings who called themselves perfect can be killed by mining equipment and communication arrays. As Juhi began transmitting the final message that would turn a galaxy upside down, Dongjun thought about the Cathari. They had discovered the truth too late to save themselves, but they had left behind the tools that another species could use. The Vorthak had ruled through fear and the belief that they were invincible. In a few hours, humans across the galaxy would learn that their oppressors were not gods. They were just thieves who had finally stolen from the wrong species. Admiral Do-Hyun Park stood on the bridge of the cargo hauler New Hope, watching as Vorthak warships approached his small fleet. 3 months ago, he had been a shipping coordinator. Today, he was the closest thing humanity had to a military commander. The human fleet was a joke by coalition standards. 23 cargo ships, 15 mining vessels, and 8 passenger transports. No weapons, no shields, no armor. Just ships designed to carry people and supplies between human colonies. But Haewon Kim, working frantically in the engine room below, had spent weeks modifying every system on every ship. The mining lasers now operated at frequencies that could shatter Vorthak crystals. The communication arrays had been boosted to broadcast killing signals across entire star systems. Even the simple navigation computers had been rewired to produce the electromagnetic radiation that was deadly to their enemies. Admiral, called Jin Anam from her position at the communications console. She was supposed to be a news reporter, but today she was coordinating between human ships spread across 3 solar systems. The Vorthak are demanding our surrender. They say they will be merciful if we submit now. Do-hyun almost laughed. Merciful. After what they had seen in the past month, he knew what Vorthak mercy looked like. The genocide had begun with surgical strikes. Vorthak fleets had appeared at human colonies without warning, using their psychic abilities to disable defenders before anyone could fight back. Colony after colony had gone silent, but something had changed when the killing reached New Seoul. Young Min Choi had been ready. When the Vorthak fleet entered the system, they found mining platforms operating at full power throughout the asteroid belt. What looked like normal mining operations was actually a carefully coordinated trap. As soon as the crystal ships moved close enough, every platform began broadcasting the frequencies that Mi Young Choi had identified as lethal to Vorthak biology. The result was the first human victory in the war. 7 Vorthak ships, their crews dead or dying from electromagnetic radiation poisoning, crashed into asteroids or drifted helplessly in space. The surviving ships had fled, broadcasting terror and confusion across their psychic networks. The galaxy had felt that psychic scream. For the first time in thousands of years, Vorthak had been killed not by other Vorthak but by beings they considered barely intelligent animals. Send our response, Do-hyun told Gina. Tell them that subprime gamma species do not surrender to thieves and murderers. As the human ships spread out into battle formation, Do-hyun thought about everything they had learned. The truth about the Cathari genocide, the proof that Vorthak power was stolen technology, the discovery that human equipment could kill beings that controlled the galaxy, but knowledge was only useful if you could act on it. The Vorthak fleet began its attack with the confidence of gods. Their ships moved in perfect formation, their crystal hulls glowing with psychic energy. They expected the humans to panic and flee as they always had. Instead, the human ships charged straight toward them. Haewon Kim's modifications proved their worth immediately. As the distance closed, every human vessel became a weapon. Mining ships fired lasers that cut through Vorthak hulls like paper. Cargo haulers used their loading equipment to grab enemy fighters and crush them. Communication arrays broadcast killing frequencies that turned crystal beings into glittering dust. The battle was chaos. Human ships were destroyed by Vorthak energy weapons, their crews dying as they had lived, underestimated and fighting impossible odds. But for every human ship lost, 2 or 3 Vorthak vessels fell silent, their crews killed by the same technology that had once marked humans as primitive. Do-hyun watched as the flagship of the Vorthak fleet, a massive crystal cathedral that had terrorized 100 worlds, began to crack and crumble as his ships surrounded it. The beings inside were dying, their stolen psychic network collapsing as electromagnetic radiation tore their artificial biology apart. Admiral, Jinnah's voice was filled with amazement. I am receiving reports from 17 human colonies. They are all fighting back, and they are winning. The news spread through human space faster than any ship could travel. Wu Jinwang, still working inside coalition systems, watched as Vorthak commanders across the galaxy received reports that seemed impossible. The subprime species was killing prime alpha beings. The natural order was collapsing. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Min-ho Choi led a group of workers in converting their entire operation into a weapon. When Vorthak ships arrived to complete what they expected to be a simple extermination, they found humans who were no longer afraid. The mining equipment that had once served the coalition now served as instruments of rebellion. The psychological effect was devastating. The Vorthak had ruled through the belief that they were superior to all other life. They had never imagined that their subjects might fight back, much less succeed. Other species watched in shock as reports came in from across the galaxy. The humans, the lowest of the subprime species, were systematically destroying Vorthak fleets and installations. It was impossible, but it was happening. Some species began to wonder if humans could kill Vorthak. What did that mean about the natural order they had all accepted? What did it mean about their own potential? On New Busan Colony, Chan-wook Nam received reports that filled him with hope and terror. Human settlements were defending themselves successfully, but the cost was enormous. Entire colonies were being evacuated as Vorthak reinforcements arrived. The war they had started could only end with complete victory or complete destruction. We cannot go back, he told the other network leaders. The Vorthak will never forgive this. They will hunt us until every human is dead, or we will have to kill them first. Mi Young Choi, analyzing captured Vorthak technology, made a discovery that changed everything. Their psychic network is not just communication, she reported. It is their weakness. They are all connected. When we kill one, the others feel it. When we kill many, it damages the entire network. The implications were staggering. The Vorthak were not individuals as humans understood them. They were parts of a larger organism, connected by their stolen psychic technology. Killing enough of them would not just win the war, it would destroy their entire civilization. Young Min Choi, now commanding ground forces across multiple worlds, understood what this meant. We are not just fighting a war, he told his troops. We are performing surgery on the galaxy itself. The final phase of the battle began when Haiwan Kim perfected a new weapon, coordinated electromagnetic pulses generated by networks of human equipment. Instead of killing individual Vorthak, entire fleets could be eliminated simultaneously. As reports of human victories came in from dozens of star systems, Jinnah Nam documented everything. Future generations would need to understand how this had happened. How a species considered barely intelligent had challenged gods and won. But the war was not over yet. The Vorthak homeworld still existed, protected by defenses that had never been tested. The heart of their empire, the source of their power, remained untouched. Do-hyun Park looked at the stars where Vorthak fleets had once ruled without question. Now human ships moved freely through space that had been forbidden to them for generations. The beings who had called themselves perfect were dead or dying throughout the galaxy. It had taken 1 month for humans to go from scheduled genocide to galactic war. It had taken another month to prove that the Vorthak were not invincible, but the hardest battle still lay ahead. The Vorthak homeworld waited, and with it, the final test of whether subprime species could truly overthrow the order that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The humans had learned something their enemies never expected. Being underestimated was the greatest advantage any warrior could have, and they were about to prove that lesson one final devastating time. Commander Kyung-ho Lee stood in the command center of the human flagship Liberation, watching as 300 human ships moved toward the Vorthak homeworld. Around them, the space that had once been forbidden to any subprime species was now filled with vessels from mining colonies, cargo fleets, and research stations. The Vorthak homeworld appeared on their screens like a giant crystal floating in space. It was beautiful and terrible, a sphere of living diamond that pulsed with stolen psychic energy. This was the heart of the empire that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. All ships report ready, announced Sunmi Park from her position at the science station. She had been studying captured Vorthak technology for months, learning how their psychic network functioned. Today they would use that knowledge to end a civilization. The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. Every human ship carried equipment modified to produce the electromagnetic frequencies that were lethal to Vorthak biology. Instead of attacking individually, they would coordinate a single massive pulse that would reach every part of the crystal world simultaneously. Remember, Kyung-ho broadcast to the fleet, we are not here for conquest. We are here for justice. The Cathari and dozens of other species deserve this justice. As the human ships moved into position around the Vorthak homeworld, other events were unfolding across the galaxy. Bong-soo Kim, now serving as humanity's representative to the collapsing coalition, watched as species after species declared their independence from Vorthak rule. The psychological impact of human victories had shattered the order that had seemed eternal. If subprime beings could kill prime alpha gods, then what did classification mean? What did any of the old rules mean? On former coalition worlds, chaos ruled. Some species tried to fill the power vacuum left by dying Vorthak. Others retreated to their homeworlds, afraid of what the humans might do next. A few sent messages to human commanders asking for protection or alliance. But the humans were focused on their final target. Jae-hyun Choi, serving as the fleet's philosopher and historian, broadcast a message toward the crystal world. We know what you are. We know what you did to the Cathari. We know that your power is built on genocide and theft. Today the victims have their answer. The response came not in words but in raw psychic force. Every human in the fleet felt the Vorthak's collective mind pressing against theirs. trying to break their will as it had broken so many others over the millennia. But humans had one advantage the Cathari had lacked. They were naturally resistant to psychic influence. Their minds were too chaotic, too individual to be easily controlled. The same qualities that had made them subprime now made them immune to the Vorthak's greatest weapon. "All ships," Kyung-ho commanded, "begin the pulse sequence." 300 human vessels activated their modified equipment simultaneously. Mining lasers, communication arrays, power generators, and navigation computers all began, producing electromagnetic radiation at the specific frequencies that Mi Young Choi had identified months earlier. The effect on the Vorthak homeworld was immediate and devastating. The crystal surface began to crack and smoke. The psychic network that connected billions of beings started to collapse as their artificial biology failed. But this was not just the death of a species. This was the death of an idea. For thousands of years, the galaxy had believed in the natural order. Some beings were meant to rule, others to serve. Some species were prime, others subprime. This was the way things had always been and always would be. The humans had just proved that wrong. As the crystal world cracked apart, its fragments glowing like dying stars, the psychic scream of an entire civilization echoed across the galaxy. Every species felt it, the death cry of beings who had claimed to be perfect. Sunmi Park monitored the collapse from her science station. The psychic network is completely destroyed. The Vorthak as a connected civilization no longer exist. Some crystal beings survived on distant worlds, cut off from their collective mind and reduced to individual consciousness. They would live, but they would never again be the gods they had pretended to be. Without their stolen psychic technology, they were revealed as what they had always been, a primitive species that had built an empire on lies. In the aftermath, as debris from the homeworld drifted through space like glittering snow, the human fleet received thousands of messages from across the galaxy. Some were congratulations, others were pleas for mercy, and many were questions about what would come next. Kyung-ho looked around at his officers, these humans who had gone from subprime workers to the most feared military force in the galaxy. What do we do now? The answer came from an unexpected source. Misun Nam, Jiwon's granddaughter, had spent the war studying not just Vorthak technology but coalition records. She had discovered something that changed how they viewed their victory. The classification system was not just about control, she explained to the fleet commanders. It was about preventing this from happening. The Vorthak knew that if species learned to work together instead of competing for prime status, their empire would fall. Bong-Soo Kim, speaking from the emergency session of the Coalition Assembly, reported on the galaxy's reaction. Half the species want to make humans the new prime alpha. The other half want to destroy us before we become the next Vorthak. "And what do the humans want?" asked Jae-hyun Choi. The question echoed through human space, reaching every colony and settlement. The answer came back unanimous. They wanted what they had always wanted. Not to rule, but to be free. Not to be classified, but to be respected. Kyung-ho made the decision that would shape the galaxy's future. We abolished the classification system entirely. No more prime, no more subprime. Every species contributes according to their abilities and receives according to their needs. The idea was radical, revolutionary and terrifying to beings who had lived their entire existence in rigid hierarchies. But it was also liberating. Over the following months, a new order emerged. The coalition was restructured as a true alliance of equals. Species that had been enemies found common ground. Technologies were shared instead of hoarded. The galaxy began to heal from millennia of artificial division. Some species rejected the new order and retreated to isolated systems. Others embraced it so completely that they transformed their entire civilizations. But most found a middle path, gradually adapting to a universe where worth was not determined by classification. Years later, Misun Nam stood before a classroom of young beings from dozens of different species. They were learning about the old galaxy, where some were considered prime and others were deemed useful only for labor. The Vorthak were not evil because they were powerful, she taught them. They were evil because they convinced everyone, including themselves, that power made them better than others. They forgot that all intelligence is precious, all life has value, and all beings deserve respect. A young human raised her hand. "Teacher, why did it take so long for anyone to fight back?" Misun smiled. Because the Vorthak's greatest weapon was not their psychic powers or their crystal ships. It was the belief that the strong should rule the weak, that some beings are naturally superior to others. Once that belief was broken, their empire crumbled in months. The lesson ended, and the young beings filed out to their next classes. They would grow up in a galaxy where their potential was not limited by their species classification. They would work together on projects that previous generations could never have imagined. The Vorthak had ruled through division and hierarchy. They had been considered prime until humans killed them all. But their true defeat was not their death. It was the birth of a galaxy that no longer needed gods. In the end, the greatest victory was not proving that humans were prime, but proving that no one needed to be prime at all. The galaxy had learned that cooperation was stronger than domination, that diversity was more valuable than uniformity, and that the future belonged not to the perfect, but to those who refused to accept that perfection was required. The age of classification was over. The age of equality had begun.